Happy Throwback Thursday. Today's topic, Abarth value, and just car values in general. We're going to talk a little retro here. So in July, I've had this car for 4 years. Got it July of 2018. This is a 2015, and I got it for $12,000 with 34,000 miles, 34 or 35,000 miles on it. So this is one of those cars that loses half of its value at 3 years old when it's out of warranty. So I was looking up Abarth values the other day for this video, and it looks like the prices have remained the same. When I was looking at this car, when I was searching for these cars, I was finding a bunch of 2012s and 2013s with like 100,000 miles on them for $5,000 to $6,000. So I told myself, this car is probably going to suffer the same fate as 90s Eclipses. I'm 40 years old. I'm a 90s kid. So I remember those 90s Eclipses. Those 90s Eclipses were cool because they were economy cars. The base model had like 140 horsepower. Then they were turbocharged with 200. This car reminds me a lot of those old Eclipses. Base model of this has 101 horsepower, naturally aspirated. This Abarth version has 160 turbocharged. So I said to myself, these cars, once they start reaching $5,000, people are going to buy them. They're going to put a big turbo on them and blow the motor. That was my prediction for these cars. Mine is pretty much stock. The only thing I've done is oil changes and new tires and a blow-off valve. Nothing, no modifications for more horsepower. I said to myself, I saw what became of the Eclipses. It's really cool seeing a stock Eclipse now, the 90s era Eclipse, Eagle Talon, let alone a modified one. I rarely even see modified ones now these days. So when I see a stock one, I'm like, man, it's impressive that they resisted the urge to mod it all these years later. It's still stock, and that's my intention with this car. Leave it stock. I don't think many of these were made. I want to say 25,000 a year were produced, and this only had a 7-year run in the United States. So 25,000, what's my math telling me? 7 years, less than 300,000 exist. So in perspective, Toyota sells 500,000 Corollas a year, per year. I think less than 300,000 of these were made, were sent to America. So I was telling myself, when people start destroying these like they did with Eclipses, I'll have one of the few rare stock ones. But now I'm thinking to myself, seeing the value of these kind of stabilize, are people thinking like me, people my age who saw the pocket rocket cars of the 90s get modified, beat up, and now they're in junkyards? Do they look at a car like this and say, you know what, how about we preserve this car so in 10 or 20 years it'll look this good and it'll be something different on the road, especially in 20 years. Parking OCD as always. All I've done to this thing is change the oil and get new tires. If you're gonna get tires, get mucho macho tires. A car like this needs very macho tires. And then I got a blow-off valve. Like I said, $50 mod. Doesn't increase the horsepower. I don't care about horsepower these days. I just want to have some fun. And this car sounds great, and this thing shines in turns. It's not a straight line car, it's a handling car. This is cool. When you open the door, it says Abarth, 54,000 miles, almost 55. So in about 4 years, I put 20,000 miles on this. So I want to try to keep it under 100,000 as long as I can. So the only thing that has gone wrong with this car is pretty much my fault. I'm gonna start it up right here. So close the door. So that's the only thing that went wrong, this service tire pressure system. When I changed the tires, I got new sensors installed, but I didn't get the factory ones. The factory ones were like $200. I figure, okay, this car's a 2018. I changed the tires last year, so the pressure sensor batteries were like four years old. 2018, no, 6 years old, I believe. So I said, okay, you can't replace the batteries and the pressure sensor, so let me just change the pressure sensors. But I went cheap. I went with $30 pressure sensors on eBay. The seller had a good rating. It supposedly was supposed to calibrate itself, but as you can see, I'm getting that warning light. It stops blinking after a couple of miles. It might stop blinking in this video, but that's it. Like I said, the only problem with this is pretty much my fault. I put in cheap pressure sensors. Should have just went with the $200 ones. So yeah, next time I get tires, which probably won't be a while, you see the mileage on my car, I'll go with the factory ones. So here we go. Great sounding car. This is why I got the blow off valve, so it'll sound like this. And this car is pretty fuel efficient, 29 miles per gallon on this current tank. There you go, it stopped blinking. But that's it. So almost 4 years of having it, no problems, keeping it really nice. And now I'm wondering, are people my age thinking like me? Because I was like, okay, these cars are starting to be $5,000 now. When I bought this one, I'm like, okay, 5 to 7, people are going to start putting bigger turbos on this now, and they're just going to destroy them. Now, looking up the value of these cars, it's stabilizing. So maybe there are people my age who remember cars like the Eclipses that got beat up and now they're no longer around. And when you see one, you're like, man, that's a nice car. So maybe in 10, 20 years, people are going to see this and say, wow, an Abarth, that's a nice car. This guy kept his really nice. And I always told myself, if my sister ever has a kid, that was one of the other reasons I got this car. I told myself, if my sister ever has a kid, I'm giving her kid this car as their first car. So it's the looks that what drew me in of this car. The looks. I don't like modern cars. I really am not a fan of modern cars. This is the first modern car past 2010 that I liked. So the looks drew me in. The sound is what really made me want one. And the fact that at the time I bought this is one of those cars that loses half of its value. After 3 years, I said, I got to get one of these cars. I'm keeping mine really nice. And if my sister ever has a kid, this is going to be their first car. So let's see. Check in 20 years.